Hey everybody, Onepeg here with another newsy news update. Oh, never gets old. Never gets old. All right, so this podcast featured Klean, who was the host, PacePerformance, Lucas Botkin, Brandon Herrera, and our boy Nikita to talk about the ideas of gun realism and how realistic those guns are inside of Tarkov as a shooting game versus how those guns are handled and used and utilized in the real world. This kicked off with an interesting point that was made by Pace. If the guns in Tarkov were exactly like they were in the real world, the game probably wouldn't be any fun, which I have a tendency to agree with. Although he did say, for an example that he gave was like the HK416. Regardless of gun build, he said he's never shot an HK that didn't feel super harsh and shot flat. They just don't do that. And then Lucas also brought up another interesting point and said in the real world, operators that he knows, people that he's worked with in the past, don't use long barrel HKs or long barrel AR-15s or long barrel MCXs. They all end up using short barrel firearms. Unfortunately, again, in Tarkov, people have a tendency to make long barrel gun builds because the idea is obviously recoil reduction being the thing that is weighted most often. If you ever talk about Metaguns, it's always, well, how low can I get the recoil, with a complete disregard whatsoever for anything related to ergo, especially when it comes to ergo as it relates to weight. One of the interesting things that Lucas brought up was there are HKs that you can build that weigh 15 pounds, but I can still hold that up and spin around in circles and flick on people, and I don't have any type of problem with that because of how the game treats the gun. And I have a tendency to agree with this. I mean, yes, there is some arcadey aspect to the game, and it should still play like a game, but people shouldn't be able to just wave 15-pound guns around without them kind of lagging behind. You shouldn't be able to just instantly level the reticle on somebody because that gun just weighs too damn much. Nikita's response to this was that he doesn't like gun metas. And obviously 2 patches ago, we had a patch where the ergonomics was more heavily weighted and ergo builds started to make sense, right? There was less gun rattle and the guns raised faster, etc., etc., etc. And now there's going to be in the future, based on what Nikita was saying, a larger emphasis on the idea behind weight and ergonomics. People's arms should start getting tired faster. The idea behind how fast you can raise the gun to your eye to be able to shoot at people, all of that stuff will end up having more stringent penalties associated with it with low ergo and high weight gun builds. He then went on to say that it's always a struggle to balance weapon mods when they introduce new ones. His example was if he brings in like a new gun stock. When a new gun stock is added to the game, they then have to go through all of the gun stocks and rebalance all of them to fit against each other. Now, this might seem like it's a little bit extreme in some cases, and Lucas, picking up on this, even went so far as to say, well, look, if all of the guns performed exactly the same, the game would be really boring. Obviously, we can all agree with that, but that also comes with other shifts in the meta based on content creators and other influencers that start talking about gun builds they like, and then everybody goes and tries it. I'm looking at you, KS23. Now, overwhelmingly, the members of the panel complimented Nikita on the ability to build guns the way that the UI of Tarkov allows us to build guns with all of the associated attachments. Even though, and they did also bring this up, that mechanically there are obviously some things missing. But Nikita countered this by saying this is actually done on purpose because he could make something much, much more realistic, but he actually is cutting it off at this point because he doesn't want the game to be some type of training manual or online resource for people to be able to learn how to modify guns to the extent that professionals do. For example, something like explosives. He doesn't have homemade explosives to the extent that IRL ingredients are going to be included in Tarkov to be able to build some of your own homemade explosives, because if they matched real-world ingredients, that could obviously turn out badly. If you started referencing Tarkov as to why you made a dirty bomb, there's going to be a problem there. Lucas also went on to compliment Nikita in saying that the firearms and the representation of them inside of the game is actually helping people deal with the stigma of firearms that some people may at one time have felt a lot of discomfort with. And I have to agree. It's interesting to see all the gun parts I at one time would have shied away from insofar as certain gun systems because of the stigma associated with them and things that I would learn about when I was much younger. I no longer have those same feelings. In fact, I'm kind of a gun nut now. Learning about the gun parts and things that I've learned about when playing this game, as long as I have been playing it, actually has kind of turned me into somebody that really wants to go shooting with the boys. You know what I mean? I mean, shit, I discovered Brandon Herrera and Hickok and Demo Ranch and Mike over at Grand Thumb because of getting into Tarkov and just kind of going down the rabbit hole. The overall sense here is that Nikita comes off as a gun nut. I mean, he is. He has a clear and obvious passion for firearms. He goes shooting all the time. You can tell that he's into it, which is good because if he's the lead developer of a game, you want him doing this and being into guns if he's going to give a realistic representation of them. Okay, insofar as in Tarkov stuff, the first being is that the durability rate of decline of firearms is going to be an increased rate, and the ammunition that you choose to fire in the guns will influence how quickly those guns degrade. High powder count, super hard metals that are used to make AP rounds, for instance, like our 7N31 Vector Bros, that will cause the Vector to degrade a lot faster than if they were going to shoot PSO. Depending on how low the durability of the gun gets, not only will you have an increase in rate of weapon jams, etc., but you will also end up having potential shifts in center of impact. So you aim at a certain point, there's a cone of accuracy, that cone will get larger, the cone could even shift. So instead of the gun being on center, now it's moved. Keep your guns repaired. He also went so far as to say certain vendors were going to sell certain quality levels of firearms. For instance, if you go to buy a Western firearm from Peacekeeper, that will probably be in close to, or if not even pristine condition. But there's also the possibility that somebody like Prapper could be carrying one that at best you're going to get like a 70 or 80% durability firearm that you won't be able to repair better than that. And the repair mechanics are also going to have diminishing returns, similar to what we see with armor. In addition, the next patch is also going to include an optics rework. So things like eye relief, the distance from the scope to your eye, those really dark halo effects that we see with certain gun builds, the red dot optics like a PKO6 being the meta optic, the go-to optic for everyone right now. The PKO6 in real life is complete trash. No one wants to use it. So they're going to rework how the red dots look across the board, and red dots that are considered like higher level or higher grade will look like they're higher level or higher grade, like an RMR is supposed to. And then much more future facing, the idea behind Tarkov, and we've already kind of seen this discussed, but never a definitive until now. Upon release, your player's account will have a persistent PMC character that is permanently in the game world. Those servers will never wipe. At some point in the future, after day one, there will be a seasonal character that gets introduced. If you so choose, you can play a seasonal character which will be on its own servers. Now that seasonal character will have incentives, cosmetics, whatever, that will be awarded at the end of the season that then will transfer to your permanent PMC upon the completion of that season. Okay, and lastly, there was a pretty major conversation that had been shifted to based on, honestly, it was based on face shields. Of all things, Lucas ended up bringing up a really interesting piece or point about riot face shields. He showed that the riot face shield on a Wendy Exfil helmet, for example, doesn't fit behind a standard stock. You can't ADS with a riot shield on unless you have a stock that's designed to go underneath the riot shield, like you would find on an MCX. Nikita said, yeah, we actually have that stock modeled, but they're hesitant because the player base got used to a certain thing. And this is where the conversation shifted, because overwhelmingly, and I mean overwhelmingly, the people that were involved in this conversation, including chat, all agreed that Nikita should be working on this as a passion project. He should be developing the game that he wants to see made, and I could not agree more, and maybe not put such an emphasis on the community's involvement. Because most of the quality of life things that have been modified inside of Tarkov were modified based on community input, well thought out posts and stuff on Reddit threads. But for every one of those well thought out posts, how many posts have we seen of people that are just going off the handle telling Nikita that he's a piece of shit? Anyone in his position would have to go through phases where they get shock and awe and start feeling internally shitty, and then have to develop some type of resistance to all of that. And that sucks. Who the fuck wants to go through that? I sure as shit don't. And I've had to because I'm here. But getting back to the game, the idea is that if Nikita's vision for this is to make the game incredibly punishing and maybe even more realistic than it is right now, and the community's only going to offer him some type of backlash, that's kind of shitty, man. Like, let the guy make the game he wants to make. And if it alienates some of you guys and you move on, then so be it. You're going to end up watching streams, and Klean was the one that ended up actually saying this. You guys are going to end up watching streams by guys like me or guys like him or guys like Pestley or guys like Landmark, and you're going to see them making plays, and you're going to be like, wow, no shit. And you're going to come back and play. At least some of you will. You can't say that you won't, because some of you guys that are watching this right now have already done that. You've quit for a wipe or 2 or 3, and then you've come back and played and just been like, hey, you know, maybe I'll check this out again. 1,000 hours later, you're still here. Right? So what happens if the weight system gets reverted to something that starts turning yellow at 20 kilos and taps out at 60? And you guys can't fill your backpacks anymore. You're going to lose your mind? Or you're going to adapt and deal with it? You know what I'm saying? Personally, I'm going to adapt because I like the challenge. Now, in response to all of these suggestions, Nikita said, well, that's why we're making these modifications slowly. And that's right, Nikita. Put it in slow. Inch by inch. Like a gentleman. Oh, yeah. Now, the podcast ended with the podcast members trying to convince Nikita that he needed to take a little break and fly to Texas and go and shoot some guns. To which I'm going to say this. If you assholes fly him to Texas and don't invite me, I swear to fucking God. I swear to God. Clean? Anyway, guys, that's the podcast summary. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.